go, Steelers. Here we go. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Welcome into the Steelers Talk Live Show. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. The producer waving his towel still is Jeffrey Cooperstein. And welcome into the Steelers Talk Live Show this week, guys, where we got a bunch of great content coming your way. First up, I'm going to reveal my reasoning for why I think the Pittsburgh Steelers collapsed in 2024 and why that reason should give you hope as a Steelers fan heading into 2025. Then I'll get into my list of surprise Steelers cut candidates for 2025. I'll let you guys know 5 players on the Steelers roster that could be traded this season. And then we'll talk a little bit about Kaleb Johnson and why I think he is the Pittsburgh Steelers' missing piece on offense to finally get Arthur Smith's offense going. All right, man. Coop, how are you doing on this beautiful Monday? You're waving your towel a lot there, pal.
Yeah, my arm's a little tired. I was seeing how long I could go, but I think I'm going to stop now because now my arm's a little sore.
Pause.
Wait, what do you mean by that? I don't get it.
That's fine if you don't get it. But let us know down there in the comment section. Who do you think's going to have the better season next year? Jaylen Warren or Kaleb Johnson? Coop, I kind of feel like it's going to start the year where Jalen's going to get most of the reps, even though Kaleb's going to work his way in. And then by the end of the season, Kaleb Johnson's going to be this team's bona fide number one.
Yeah, I think by the end of the season, it wouldn't shock me at all if Johnson was your number one running back. The conventional wisdom would say that Warren starts the year as RB1, and then as the season goes on, and as as Kaleb Johnson gets more familiar with the NFL game and the offense, I think he starts to take over. And at the end of the year, it would not surprise me whatsoever if Kaleb had more yards than Jaylen.
And we have a live poll going on right now in the chat, guys, if you want to vote. True or false, the Steelers will have a top 10 rushing offense in the league this upcoming season. The Steelers had like a bottom 5, bottom 10 at best rushing game last year with Najee Harris. 67%, about two-thirds of Steelers fans, think that the Steelers will have a top 10 rushing game next year. Coop, do you think that the Steelers get there with these two running backs?
Top 10?
It's going to depend on the O-line.
Exactly.
It's going to depend on the O-line.
Does Broderick take the next step or not? Does Troy Fautanu play a healthy season or not? Does Zach Frazier play a healthy season or not? That's kind of what it comes down to, if you ask me.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that right there. Obviously, Pat Meyer is still here, so I completely understand if you have very little faith in this offensive line to develop. But you guys know me, man. I'm the optimistic type, and I think that the Steelers have a lot of belief in this young core, and there is a lot of talent on this offensive line. So I'm definitely not gonna rule it out that this team's a top 10 rushing team in the league next year. All right, before we get into our segments today, guys, I do want to let you guys know, if you want to get on screen next to me here, if you have a Steelers topic you want me and Coop to discuss today, donate to the show. Any dollar amount, $1, $2, $5, $10, or more. Doesn't matter, guys. We do appreciate all the financial support that you guys give to our channel here. We do provide this content for you guys for free on this channel, but if you feel like you want to kind of tip me and Coop here, feel free to do so, and you get your question on the show today. So if you have a topic you want me and Coop to discuss, you guys can send in a super chat, or we actually get to keep more of the proceeds when you use Venmo, Cashapp, or PayPal. So if you want me and Coop to get more of the donations you guys send in, you guys can send in a Venmo at Jack-Sperry, a Cashapp at $CaptainJack19, or on PayPal at Captain Jack Rabbit. Also, we're going to be doing a $20 Aaron Rodgers jersey raffle whenever Rodgers decides to finally sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if he does so, we'll be giving away a Steelers jersey. And we already have a bunch of names in that jersey raffle. So if you want in, 2 raffle tickets for every $20 Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal that comes in. All right, guys, I want to see who's in the chat right now. Let us know. Type those me's down there in the chat if you've liked today's live stream. We've already got 183 people watching live. Only 25 people have liked the show. If you've watched the show before, guys, you know what's up. You got to click that thumbs up icon. Help out that YouTube algorithm. Help us get as many Steelers fans in here as humanly possible. Coop, you want to give some shout-outs to the people spamming me?
I'll get some shout-outs. And for you Jets that were have your panties in a wad because we were 90 seconds late. Calm down a bit, all right?
Hey, they're just ready for some good old Steelers content today. They're excited.
I get it. I see Gary Frank, Kareem Richardson, Mr. Deadhead, Michael Dormant, Quincy Miles, a fan of your channel. says me in the chat. That's an interesting name.
Yeah, appreciate you, a fan of our channel.
JT Productions, Dominic Schrader, Justin McFadden, Chuck Dugan.
Chuck?
Doug Printy says Steelers might win 8 games. Is this the year?
Well, I mean, I've been hearing for the last 3 seasons that the Steelers were going to finally have a losing season, and they never do. So, until it happens, I'm not going to believe it's going to happen.
Tell me who's playing quarterback for the Steelers.
True. I mean, if you're having Aaron Rodgers, we're probably talking, depending on how the offensive line plays and how Rodgers plays, anywhere between, 9 and, am I crazy to say 12 wins?
If you get Rodgers, I think that's the range, 9 to 12.
Because, last year, this team was 10-3 when T.J. Watt was healthy. And we'll talk about this in our first segment today. But, this team was well on their way to a division championship last year. And I think this roster is better than it was last year. So, as long as T.J. Watt stays healthy, he's the most impactful defensive player in all of football. So I feel like if you have T.J. Watt healthy, anything is possible for this football team.
I mean, T.J. has to be healthy.
T.J. has to be healthy. That is a requisite. If he gets injured again, the season's over, just like it was last year. All right, man, speaking of that, I'm going to let you guys know the number one reason why I think the Pittsburgh Steelers collapsed last year. It doesn't have anything to do with Mike Tomlin. It doesn't have anything to do with Russell Wilson. It doesn't have anything to do with Arthur Smith. Our first segment today, why the Pittsburgh Steelers collapsed in 2024 and why that should give you hope as a Steelers fan heading into 2025. Then we'll talk about some surprise cut candidates. We'll talk about my trade candidates, 5 players on the Steelers roster that I think could get traded this upcoming season. And then we'll talk about Kaleb Johnson and why I think he is the missing piece to take this Steelers offense to the next level. We got 4 segments to kick off your week here on Steelers Talk. So without further ado, let's get into our first one. Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry, and today I'm going to be breaking down the number one reason why I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers collapsed at the end of the 2024 season, and I think that this reason doesn't get talked about enough on Steelers Twitter, on Steelers YouTube, among the Steelers fan base. I think a lot of people blame things like Mike Tomlin, Russell Wilson, other things. I actually don't think it's any of those reasons, so stay tuned for what the reason is and then why this reason should give you hope as a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into the 2025 season. So if there's someone in your life that needs a little bit of hope around this football team heading into the season, share this video with someone that needs some hopium. Coop added that hopium piece there on this one. But let us know what you guys think. Go ahead, share this video on your social. Share it with the people in your life they think need a little bit of hopium for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So before I start here, I do want to acknowledge that there is never just one reason why a team has a late season collapse. There's obviously a lot of different factors at play, and there's a lot of different things that do go into a late season collapse like the Steelers had last year, where you lose your final 4 football games, including a playoff game in the first round, right? And the usual suspects that people usually point to are Mike Tomlin, the head coach. And listen, Tomlin is not completely absolved of blame here. He is the head coach, all these different things, and he is in charge of getting this team to be prepared to play and win football games, particularly late in the season, and they didn't do that. So Tomlin is not absolved here. So what I'm going to say on today's video does not absolve Mike Tomlin, and also doesn't absolve Russell Wilson, but I think a lot of people saw the collapse of the offense and saw the collapse of the team and blamed it all on Russell Wilson, saying that he absolutely sucks, when I actually don't think, I think that there was too much blame put on Russell Wilson for the collapse of the 2024 season. And my opinion here, guys, is that the reason why the Steelers collapsed at the end of the season last year was because they sustained 2 specific injuries: George Pickkins and T.J. Watt. And with those 2 injuries, even though those guys continued to play, they did not come back playing at the same level that they were pre-injury, and the Steelers just simply couldn't recover from those injuries at the end of the NFL season. All right, and like I said, guys, you might be saying at home, Jack, TJ, and GP came back to play at the end of the season. TJ didn't even miss a single game. He came back the next week. How could you possibly say that these injuries affected the Steelers as much as you say that they did? Well, well, we can take them at one of a time here. I think that neither of them was really the same. Obviously, George Pickkins had a hamstring injury that he dealt with. He came back, but even when he came back, he was not the same player. You can just look at his statistics late in the season versus earlier in the season to prove that fact. And losing George Pickens' impact as a deep play threat kind of took away the deep ball and took away the threat of the deep pass with Russell Wilson, because you took George Pickens away and you were left with guys like Scotty Miller, Van Jefferson. Calvin Austin III's fine, but he's definitely not a number one receiver, right? So the Steelers were really strapped for wide receiver help once Pickens went down, and even when he came back, he was definitely not the same player, which took away the threat of the deep ball for opposing defenses, which of course affected everything with the Steelers offense, the run game, the passing game, everything. And then there's the other thing here, and I actually think the injury to TJ Watt is even more significant here, because he is the NFL's most valuable defensive player on any football team in professional football right now when he is healthy, all right? And you can just take a look at the Steelers' numbers, all right, before TJ Watt got that ankle injury versus after, all right? The Steelers were winning 2/3 of their games when Watt was healthy, and then they were winning 0% of their games. They went 0-4 after TJ Watt had that injury, and you guys can see the results. The offense scored almost a touchdown less per game, and then they allowed literally 13 more points per game. All right, that's unbelievable. To go from 14.5 points per game, or actually, no, they gave up 10 points per game more per game. They're 17.6 all the way to 27.5 is an astronomical number. So, I mean, just one player's injury affected this team by 14 points on average per game. And then the sacks per game, you guys can see there, almost a sack less per game. And then, the turnover percentage there went from 2.1% of defensive plays ended up being a turnover to just 0.75 after the TJ Watt injury. So even though TJ kept playing because of that ankle injury and kind of limiting what he was able to do on the field and the impact he was able to have on the Steelers defense, the entire team as a whole completely crumbled. And if you think 2024 was the only time that this happened, let's look back at 2022 when, of course, we know Matt Canada was the offensive coordinator. Kenny Pickett was in his rookie season. Mitchell Trubisky didn't have a very good season that year. The offense was terrible, and despite that, with TJ Watt on the field healthy that season, they went 8-2. All right, one of the best teams in football. Without him, 1-7. All right, that is an absolute 180 turn there with Watt on the field versus when he's not on the field. And you guys could see that throughout his career, where, of course, the Steelers have gone 1-11 in Watt's career when he doesn't play. Like, it's just so evident that this kind of production absolutely has a huge impact on the Pittsburgh Steelers, not only on the defensive side of the ball, but their team as a whole. Since he's entered the league, he's first in sacks, first in tackles for loss, first in forced fumbles, and first in overall turnover-worthy plays created and forced fumbles plus interceptions. Those are astronomical numbers right there, guys. And if you take away that impact via an injury, this Steelers team absolutely collapses, and we saw that last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, let's be completely honest with each other, all right? You look at the impact when Watt's on the field versus not. The reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers have been able to remain competitive over the last several seasons, despite the fact that their offensive play and their numbers, let's just say what it is, it's been awful. The reason why the Steelers are still winning 9, 10, 11 wins per season is not because of Mike Tomlin's leadership necessarily. It's a portion of it, but it's because of TJ Watt's dominance on the defensive side of the ball, keeping this team in ball games and helping this team put this team in position to win football games consistently. And you can just look back at the 2024 season here, guys, before the injuries to George Pickens and TJ Watt. This team had probably the best defense in football. They were turning the ball over multiple times a game, pretty much every single football game, and they were averaging giving up less than 17 points a game. Elite defensive production. Plus, you had a good enough offense with Russell Wilson, George Pickens, etc. with the deep ball to have people talking about this team like they were a legit Super Bowl contender sitting at 10-3 before George Pickens ended up having the hamstring injury, followed by TJ Watt getting the ankle injury 1 week after that. And then after those injuries happen, what happens? The Steelers can't win a football game, right? They go 0-4 against playoff caliber opponents, to be fair there, and they're not really even competitive down the stretch. So these injuries, to me, were definitely the number one reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers collapsed at the end of the 2024 campaign. It wasn't Mike Tomlin. It wasn't necessarily Russell Wilson. It was you lost two very impactful players, arguably your most impactful players on both sides of the football. And even though they came back to play, they weren't the same players, and the team wasn't the same as well. So your question at home right now is probably, Jack, the season's over. It's been over for a long time at this point. Why are you still talking about the 2024 collapse like it's still relevant? Well, coming up here, I'm going to let you guys know why this reasoning should give you hope as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan heading into 2025. But before we get into that, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Fanatics. And if you're looking for a reason to hope as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, how about you look at DK Metcalf, number 4, right here, baby. Go to chatsports.com/DK to get your Steelers jersey in your closet today. And then also, every time that you guys make a purchase, hey, we get part of the proceeds here at Chat Sports from our friends at Fanatics. So if you guys want to help yourself out and you want to help us out here at Steelers Talk, go to chatsports.com/DK. The link to that is in the comments and description of today's show if you want to get your DK Metcalf jersey this afternoon. So a reason for hope here, guys, and the reason why I think that, if you look at the 2024 season with the lens that those injuries really impacted the Pittsburgh Steelers, you could probably say here that if TJ Watt and George Pickkins and the core of Steelers star players stay somewhat healthy this year, Pittsburgh can get back to where they were at their 2024 peak, where they were winning games consistently against good football teams, all right? And I think that, in my opinion, this year's team is even better than the one that started 10-3 last year. So if you can get back to that defensive level of dominance that you had last year with TJ Watt fully healthy, I think that you're looking at a team here that can be very, very successful in 2025 and get back to that kind of area where people are talking about this team like they can make some serious damage in the NFL postseason. I mean, right now we're expecting Aaron Rodgers to be the quarterback of the offense. This offensive line is very unproven, sure, but there's a lot of talent on there, multiple first-rounders and second-rounders on that offensive line that this team really believes in. You got, not only do you have George Pickkins, who's a big impact player, but even if he gets hurt this year, you have a little bit of insurance because you got DK Metcalf as the other top wide receiver in this group. Then you get Kaleb Johnson to replace Najee Harris, who I think is a big upgrade. You still have Jalen Warren and Pat Freiermuth. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I think that you have made upgrades as well. All right, you get Derek Harmon in the first round to bolster up the depth of this defensive line. We already knew how great the depth was in this edge rusher group that the Pittsburgh Steelers have. I also think that, in the inside linebacker room, you're still sitting pretty good. Landon Roberts left in free agency, but I think Peyton Wilson's ready to take on a full-time starting job, and this team certainly believes in Cole Hulkcom and Malik Harrison to kind of fill out the rest of those needs that the Pittsburgh Steelers have along the middle of their defense heading into next season. Then you can take a look at their safety depth, and they like the players that they have in this group as well. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, and last year the Steelers really did not have a reliable third safety. They believe they found that player this year in Juan Thornhill, which they think is going to be able to level up their defense. And then in the cornerback room, they certainly feel like Darius Slay is a big step up from Dante Jackson and the level of play he gave you last year. And, I think that they like some of their nickel candidates. They like Beanie Bishop Jr., Dante Cant, Sebastian Castro. Somebody is going to rise to the top in that room. And I think that on both sides of the ball, the Pittsburgh Steelers are better suited this year than they were last year. And last year they were sitting at 10-3. And by the way, guys, if you're sitting there saying, well, Jack, they didn't play anybody before that final stretch, they were 4-0 against playoff caliber teams, against teams that made the playoffs last year before George Pickkins and TJ Watt got hurt. They beat the Baltimore Ravens at home. They beat the Washington Commanders, who made an NFC title game on the road. They beat the Denver Broncos. They beat the Los Angeles Chargers. They were 4-0 against playoff teams before these guys got injured. So I think that, especially if TJ Watt stays healthy, this Steelers team has a chance to really make some noise like they had the opportunity to last year before those injuries. And personally, as a Steelers fan, I have hope for the 2025 campaign. So sound off for me down there in the comments section. What is your level of hope for the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into the 2025 season. Put it on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being this team's going to suck, they're going to be terrible, I have no confidence in this team heading into next year, to 10 being I think this team can win the Super Bowl. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. For me, I'm probably sitting at around a 7 or an 8 at this point in time. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I really do appreciate all of your guys' support. We cover the Pittsburgh Steelers for free every single day on this channel, so if you want more all throughout the offseason as we approach the 2025 regular season, click that subscribe button and join the Steelers Talk family today. First segment in the books there, Mr. Coop. A lot of hopium in that first segment there. But I think that the point of, TJ Watt being the most impactful defensive player on the planet, and the fact that he injured that ankle where he was not able to move the same way that he was pre-injury. Listen, man, the impact that he brings, the sacks, the tackles for losses, the forced fumbles, the interceptions. He has 7 interceptions in his career. Like, that impact and that kind of production just can't be replaced.
It absolutely can't. TJ Watt is the most important player on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think there's any question about it. I think he's the best defensive player in football. You can argue with the wall if you want to say Myles Garrett. I'll say you're an idiot. But you can tell the clear impact that he has. I mean, we outlined the stats. When he doesn't play, the Steelers do not win.
And what's amazing about it, guys, is that the Steelers can have a dog shit offense, and they're still one of the best teams in football when he's playing. They're still winning 2/3 of their games, at least, even when they have one of the worst offenses in the National Football League. Just imagine if Aaron Rodgers comes here and, they have a top 15 level offense.
That's all they need.
That's all they need to be a legit Super Bowl contender if TJ Watt is healthy.
Yep.
All right, because you look at the rest of the help that he has on the defense, it's the most expensive defense in football for a reason, but even the most expensive defense in football needs their star player to be able to operate the way they want to in order to be the elite caliber defense that we saw from this team before TJ got injured. So really, I think that should give you guys at home a lot of hope for this football team. Because, listen, this offense and this culture has been super bad at offense the last several seasons, and they've been competitive and playoff caliber because of what TJ Watt has been able to bring to the table. So as long as TJ doesn't fall off a cliff here and your offense is just somewhat decent, like we saw last year, that this is a team that can beat legit playoff teams with how good this defense can be when TJ Watt is fully operational. If you guys want to send in a donation, if you guys want to call me an idiot for saying what I just said about the Pittsburgh Steelers or about TJ Watt, and you think the Steelers should trade him, let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section, and send in a donation if you haven't already. Do we have any? We do not have any Cashapps or Venmos as of yet, but if you guys want to send in a Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal, you are more than free to do so. Coop, are we ready to get into our next segment here?
Let's get it.
Our next segment is surprise Steelers cut candidates that you guys should be keeping your eye on as we approach the 2025 season. Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Today, we're going to be discussing surprise cut candidates for your Pittsburgh Steelers. 8 players that might get surprisingly cut before the Steelers make their final 53-man roster before the start of the 2025 regular season. Before we get into the content today, we really appreciate you guys. And if you appreciate the work that we do here at Steelers Talk to give you guys free, insightful, in-depth Steelers content here on the YouTube platform, you guys can send in a super thanks today to tip us here at Steelers Talk. And here's the deal I'm going to make. Everybody that's super thanks on this video, we're going to give a shout out to later this week here on Steelers Talk. All right. So the way that you super thanks is you click the heart button with the money sign in the middle. You send in any dollar amount. All right. It could be $1, $2, whatever you guys want to tip us here at Steelers Talk. You guys send it in. And if you send it in, we will make sure to get you a shout out on a future edition of Steelers Talk later this week. Now, before we get into my list here, I want to be abundantly clear. I'm not necessarily predicting that all 8 of the players I'm discussing today are not going to make the roster. All right, I'm saying that these are 8 relatively surprising names that I think a lot of people kind of expect to make the final roster or have made the roster in the past that I think have a chance to be cut this offseason. Okay, so you take a look at my first name, and it's Mark Robinson, who has made this team multiple times and, is a special teams contributor, and there's still a possibility he could make the final roster because he is a good special teams player. But he is an undersized inside linebacker. He's not particularly good in coverage. He's more of just a true special teams player at this point in time. And with this team adding Malik Harrison, Carson Bruner, Cole Holcomb, getting back into the fold here, it's looking like there's less and less room for Mark Robinson to prove that he deserves to be kind of like a fifth inside linebacker in this group. I could certainly see him with the experience that he has with this team to be a prime practice squad candidate with the players that they currently have in the inside linebacker room. But I do think with the additions to the off-ball linebacker group here that Robinson has a chance to be cut this year. Then we get to James Pierre, somebody that every time he's been on the Steelers roster in the preseason, he's made the final roster. All right. So he is somebody that, Mike Tomlin has an affinity for. He's played a lot of football for this football team. Not necessarily fantastic football, but, he has played a lot, and he does have chemistry with some of the guys in this locker room here. But you take a look at the additions they've made to the cornerback room here, and I like some of them. I like Dante Kent. I like Brandon Echols. I like Corey Trice Jr. as depth pieces to Joey Porter Jr., Darius Slay, and Beanie Bishop Jr. I even like Sebastian Castro, who'd be more of a backup nickel / backup safety in this group. But it wouldn't shock me at all if James Pierre ends up, being on the outs at the end of the preseason this season, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make the final 53. Then we get to the offense here. We'll talk about a wide receiver, Scotty Miller, and I think that Scotty, he's somebody that made the team last year. It seems like Arthur Smith has a little bit of an affinity for him, and, he got some production last year, not a whole lot, but he did get a little bit. And you take a look at the wide receiver room this year. DK, obviously, is the big addition. You still have George Pickkins, obviously. You got Calvin Austin III. You add Robert Woods, which was a move that I think Scotty Miller probably didn't love too much because the Steelers usually carry 6 wide receivers, which means that he's probably on the outs. That is, if Ben Skoranek and Roman Wilson are also slated to get final roster spots here. So Scotty's somebody that's definitely going to have to prove his worth with this football team during the offseason program and during training camp. Really looking forward to seeing what he's going to do, but he certainly has a chance to get cut. Dean Lowry is somebody that this team brought in last offseason, is somebody that they really like as a depth piece, but it wouldn't shock me at all if they end up cutting him. He's dealt with injuries, and honestly, I think that there's just better players overall in this defensive line group. You take a look at the 4-man front that the Steelers are going with next year. The Steelers spend over 80% of their snaps in a 4-down front. You got Benton and Hayward as your starters. You spent a first-round pick on Derek Harmon. You bring in Daniel Ekuale. Of course, you draft Y.A. Black as well, who's probably definitely going to make the roster as a nose tackle type of player. And, you have to think between Isaiah Loudermilk, Logan Lee, and Dean Lowry, somebody's going to get cut in that group there. And I think that Lowry, if he doesn't have a good preseason, has a chance to kind of surprisingly get cut as a veteran player on this defense. So coming up here, the real fun begins. I get to some more surprising Steelers cut candidates here, including some names that I think might make some people upset, but I'm going to explain my reasonings here in just a moment. But first, take a guess for me down there in the comments section. Which players will surprisingly make the 53-man roster for the Steelers? Who are your guys? Let me know down there in the comments section. What is somebody that is surprising that is going to make the final 53-man roster? But before we get into all that, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash all on your phone. You can download the Prize Picks app today. And with millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. You can also turn your playoff hot takes into tickets this basketball season. And you can get tickets to basketball's championship series even, because every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you in the Takes 2 ticket sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the championship. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, where every Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. If you guys want to see an example of a PrizePicks projection here during the basketball playoffs, this is what it looks like. I'm taking the more on points per game average for the New York Knicks series versus the Boston Celtics for Jalen Brunson. I'm doing the same thing for points per game for Kristaps Porzingis, taking the more on him as well, and I'm taking the less on points per game average for Mikal Bridges. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Now we get into a little bit more of the spicy section here where I got Cole Hulkcom as a potential cut candidate for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the way that Cole gets cut, guys, is if he has just a bad preseason and after that horrific knee injury, he just doesn't look up to snuff, which I do think is a realistic possibility. We do see guys that take a whole year off of football, especially coming off a big injury like that. And it's not like Hulkcom was like a dynamic player before the injury. So if he's decreased athletically from that point, I do think that there is a chance that he ends up getting cut by the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially if other off-ball linebackers in this group like Carson Bruner or Mark Robinson really has a good preseason. I think that there is a chance that Hulkcom could be the odd man out. I'm really rooting for him. Obviously, this entire journey to get back to the football field was really arduous for him. I'm really hoping that he can come out and have a really good season, but I do want to acknowledge the reality that there is a chance that he could get cut. Then we get to Cordero Patterson, who I was actually in favor of just cutting just straight up this offseason, and it's still possible here that if they want to bring on like a J.K. Dobbins or a Nick Chubb or something like that, I could certainly see the Steelers let go of Cordero Patterson as well, who is somebody that, is more of just a special teams player at this point. He had some nice runs last year, but honestly, he looked a lot slower than in previous seasons there with the Atlanta Falcons and other teams last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he's RB4 on the depth chart right now, and depending on how many running backs the Pittsburgh Steelers want to keep on the roster, I just don't know how much sense it makes to keep Cordero on the field. And honestly, his special teams value isn't even that high. He wasn't really an effective kick returner last year for the Pittsburgh Steelers, so I do think there's a decent chance he could get cut. Then this one might surprise some people, but Robert Woods, and this is kind of similar to the Cole Holcomb thing, where like, what if Robert Woods is just older and, he's not, really working up to snuff? And what if some of the other wide receivers in this group, maybe like a Brandon Johnson or Scotty Miller, or maybe one of the wide receivers they brought in as UDFAs really show out? I think that if I had to guess right now, I definitely think Robert Woods makes the roster. He's a really good run blocker. He is a pros pro. Would be a very good mentor to younger receivers like George Pickkins and Roman Wilson with this football team. But do I think it's a 100% chance he makes the roster? I wouldn't go that far because he is somebody that is aging. He's somebody that's lost a lot of his athleticism, and if that dip continues to slide here during the preseason, there's other younger, more talented, more athletically gifted players that are showing out during the preseason. I can't say it would completely shock me if Bobby Trees doesn't make the final 53. Then we get to one that might shock some people as well, Roman Wilson, and again, this is surprise cut candidates, and the way that this happens is just Roman Wilson's not a good football player, guys. And, I don't think this is going to happen. I will say that right now. I'm a believer in Roman Wilson. I actually think, especially if Aaron Rodgers comes here, Rodgers has had a lot of success with similar type of receivers to Roman Wilson. My pro comp for Roman was Randall Cobb, who of course was one of, Aaron Rodgers' favorite receivers in his entire career. I think there's a chance Roman Wilson could be a really solid number 3 receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, but he needs to prove it. All right. He had an opportunity to make, get on the field last year, and he never really seized that opportunity. Apparently, he had a really tough time picking up the playbook. And if that continues into year 2 and they just don't think that he's good enough to play, and there's, like I said, other players that really have good preseasons, this might be a very unfortunate cut for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would say it's highly unlikely. I think that, this guy's essentially going into his rookie season. They're going to give him some leeway. He would have to be really, really bad during the preseason and training camp for them to cut him. But I can't say at this point point, it's a 100% certainty that he'll be on the roster. So take a guess for me down there in the comment section. Which players will surprisingly not make the final 53-man roster? I gave you some names today to consider. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. And that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. I appreciate you guys stopping by and making it to the end of today's video. If you liked what you heard today and you want more of it in the future, click that subscribe button right now to never miss one of our videos. Got a nice string of super chats here, Mr. Coop. First from Gary Frank, my guy, says, sign Nick Chubb. He will be great in the short yardage game. And by the way, let's go Steelers. Let's go Jack and Coop. Let's go Yinzers. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. Appreciate you, Gary. I would be fine if they picked up Nick Chubb. He's better than Cordero Patterson.
Yeah, but where does he so you just run with the trio of Warren, Chubb, and Johnson? And
Gainwell. You'd carry 4 running backs, but that's the thing, Gary. I don't think they're looking to add anybody. Kaleb Johnson's over 220 pounds. He's your power back. All right? He's going to be the guy that they use on short yardage situations. So I don't think you necessarily need Nick Chubb. I know you're a big fan of his, Gary, but after taking Kaleb Johnson, I think the 3 running backs they're going to roll with this year is going to be Jaylen Warren, Kaleb Johnson, Kenneth Gainwell.
We also have to stop looking at Chubb as the guy that he was a few years ago, who was one of the best running backs in the league. I think the multiple devastating injuries have kind of set him back a lot, and I just don't think he's what he once was.
I don't disagree. He is coming second year off the big ACL tear, so we'll see how he is. I still think he can be valuable as a bigger short yardage back like Gary is suggesting here, but Kaleb Johnson's more than capable of doing that for the Steelers. He's very big, very strong. He wouldn't have any issues with that. Justin Yankuski, my man, $5, says Johnson, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Watt MVP, Rodgers Comeback Player of the Year, Tomlin Coach of the Year, if Jack's prediction comes true.
We'll see you in Northern California if all this happens.
Well, I don't think Watt will win MVP. That's the thing. I think that a quarterback will win MVP, but I'm just saying I think Watt might win Defensive Player of the Year.
What if JJ has 26 sacks?
What's that?
What if he has 26 sacks?
Well, then, no. Even then, they'll still give it to a quarterback.
If he has the best year for a defensive end ever?
Yeah, they'll still give it to a quarterback.
Well,
because that's just the way the NFL works. They'll give it to Jaden Daniels. They'll give it to Josh Allen. They'll give it to Patrick Mahomes. They'll give it to Lamar Jackson.
Dak Prescott?
Not Dak Prescott because he stinks. But, Rodgers is actually not eligible for Comeback Player of the Year because you have to be coming off an injury to win that award.
Is that true?
Yeah, because Joe Flacco won it without coming off an injury, and the NFL said, we're not doing that again. You have to come off an injury. So Rodgers would not be eligible for that. Tomlin might win Coach of the Year. If they win 11, 12 games, I think this team actually has the potential to do if Watt stays healthy, then I think Tomlin would probably win Coach of the Year. I think Watt would win Defensive Player of the Year. And Johnson, he's going to have some competition. Johnson's going to have guys like, Matthew Golden, Ashton Genty, Omarion Hampton. He's going to have some very stiff competition, but I'm not going to say Kaleb Johnson can't win Offensive Rookie of the Year this year, Coop. I'm not going to say it's impossible.
No, they actually can. I absolutely believe
especially if he wins the running back 1 job out of camp, which I don't think he will. I think it'll take him a little bit of time in the season for him to win the full-time job. But if he's really as good as I think he's going to be, yeah, man, I think that's definitely a possibility. $5 from my man Gary again. Says they should have drafted Ibuka. He's the next Pickkins, but a better off-field demeanor. He could have learned under Pickkins and DJ for a year. I think that Ibuka is not Pickkins. He doesn't have the downfield crazy catch ability that Pickkins does. That's what I'd say. And he doesn't have the separation ability down the field. Now he does have separating ability as a route runner to the short and intermediate levels of the field. I just don't know if he's a burner. And it's not like Pickkins is a burner, but he's a downfield winner. I don't see that in Ibuka. If they wanted to trade Pickkins, I would have been okay with Ibuka. But if Pickkins is going to stay, which it sounds like he's going to, I have no problem with the way that they handled the draft this year. All right. We have a $5 super chat from Dominic. I see you, Dominic. But we're going to get to your super chat After this next segment, I've got some Steelers trade candidates to get to with you guys here. 5 players that I think the Steelers could trade at some point during this season. Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Today, we're going to be breaking down 5 Steelers players that I could see get traded either before or during the 2025 NFL season this year. Before we get into it today, predict it for me down there in the comment section. Will the Steelers be buyers or sellers once we get to the NFL trade deadline midway through the 2025 NFL season? Give me a B if you think they're going to be buyers, or type S if you think they're going to be sellers to kick off today's show. So before we get into it today, I want you guys to keep in mind, most of the players that are on today's list, I think, have no chance of being traded during the offseason. I think they're only viable to be traded at the trade deadline if the Steelers are selling. Okay, so just keep that in mind once we get into the later portions of today's list. But there is one guy that I could see the Pittsburgh Steelers trade before the start of this season. All right, and this would not be something that I would be in favor for, and I think it would absolutely suck if the Pittsburgh Steelers traded this guy before the season, and it's George Pickkins. I want Pickkins to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, at least for one more season, to see how he does with DK Metcalf and see if he can, develop and grow as a person and as a player and as a professional here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I do not want to trade him. I want to make that abundantly clear because it seems like every time I talk about even the possibility of Pickkins getting traded, I get blasted in the comments for saying, why do you want to trade Pickkins? I don't. I just want to acknowledge the reality that the Steelers have been sniffing around potential trade possibilities. And I think that especially if things get hairy with Pickens' contract negotiations this offseason, things might go sour very, very fast. Now, you take a look at Pickens' profile here. There was a report from Bleacher Report's James Palmer that claims that Pickens and Pittsburgh's relationship, quote, has not gone well, unquote, behind the scenes. There's other reporting saying that Pickkins has a strong relationship with Mike Tomlin, by the way, so it kind of depends on which reports you believe out there. But I do not believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers will give Pickkins a contract extension this offseason. If he has a great season this year, if he proves himself as a consummate professional, and he has a great season statistically, I do think they will consider paying him next offseason, but I do not foresee them giving him a big contract extension here in 2025. And if he demands that extension, which is definitely not impossible, I could see the situation getting very ugly, where I could see Pickens saying, you pay me my extension, you pay me my money, or I'm not playing for you guys this year, or you guys can trade me. All right, and I think in that scenario, if he's forcing their hand like that, the Steelers would probably prefer to trade him if that's what ends up happening. Now, the scary part of that is I don't think Pittsburgh can afford to lose him, especially if they don't get a suitable replacement to be the number 2 receiver here in Pittsburgh. We saw last year what happened when you had a legit number 1 receiver, but you didn't have a legit number 2 guy to take attention off the number 1. And if you take George Pickkins out of here, it's like I love DK Metcalf, and I like Calvin Austin III as a 3rd receiver, Roman Wilson as another potential 3rd receiver. But I don't know. I think we saw this movie play out last year, guys, and it didn't work out all too well with just one legit wide receiver at the X position. All right. So if Pittsburgh has to trade George Pickkins, or if they feel like they have to trade him, I think they need to get a wide receiver back. Not only do they need to get the best possible draft pick that they can back in exchange for him, but they also need to get a wide receiver to add to this wide receiver room to help them out. Some potential landing spots here on some potential replacements on those potential destinations for George Pickkins. The New York Giants, Darius Slayton was a player that the Steelers were looking at the trade deadline last year. Big-time downfield threat. Jalen Tolbert of the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys were very heavily linked to the Steelers during the George Pickkins kind of hoopla during the draft. Jacoby Myers of the Las Vegas Raiders. Marquez Valdez-Scantling of Seattle. Seattle wanted to upgrade their X position. Valdez-Scantling has played with Aaron Rodgers before, so keep that one in mind. The Steelers were very much in on Adam Thielen at the trade deadline last year. The price was too high for him, though. And then Alan Lazard is another somebody that has played with Aaron Rodgers in the past that maybe the Jets would want to add a big-time talent like George Pickkins. Now, I think that the 2 most likely destinations, if a trade does happen, and again, I'll reiterate, I don't want a trade to happen, but Dallas is definitely a team that was connected to the Pittsburgh Steelers in trade talks for George Pickens. And then I actually think the New York Giants might be another team that might consider it as well. You take a look here at the Giants' profile. I think that Pickkins really fits what Brian Daboll wants to do in attacking down the field. He's a great downfield threat, as we know. Also, Russell Wilson, their new starting quarterback, will 100% push and pound the table for Pickkins to be a New York Giant if he's made available. And then finally, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, they know this is the year that they got to win, and they got to get this team at least in consideration for the postseason if they want to save their jobs, all right? So they might be willing to take a little bit more of a character risk in George Pickkins here. So I certainly see that fit. And then with the Dallas Cowboys, obviously they were the team most heavily linked to Pickkins in pre-draft kind of trade talks for the receiver. And, the Cowboys have certainly been a team that's not afraid to trade for receivers and take on some character risks from time to time. And, they have been willing to pay more than other teams in trades in the past. So it's very possible that these two teams are potential options for the Pittsburgh Steelers if push comes to shove this offseason. But obviously, again, I'll reiterate, ideally, George Pickkins is playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025. The only way I see the Steelers trading him is if they get to a point where they literally have to trade him, or else they're just going to, eat his contract for a year. I just don't see that happening. So we'll see what happens, but I would love to see what DK Metcalf and George Pickkins could do in this offense, especially with Aaron Rodgers throwing them the football. So hopefully this whole contract situation doesn't get too hairy this offseason. So let me know, true or false, down there in the comments section. Pickkins will be a Steeler after the trade deadline this year. Type true or type false for me down there in the comments section for today's pinned question. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a few moments. When that happens, take advantage of that time by letting me know if you think Pickkins will be a Steeler 2 seasons from now. All right, now let's get into another potential trade candidate, and this is another one that I don't think is going to happen, but I do acknowledge the possibility that if push comes to shove, it could happen, and that's TJ Watt. And you guys know how I feel about TJ Watt. I think he's the most valuable defensive player in all of football, and he's the most valuable player on the entire Steelers roster. So this is another one. Trust me, I don't want them to do, all right? But and if you guys want to see just how much I think TJ Watt is and how valuable he is to the Steelers roster and to the team, I did a whole video of why the Steelers should pay up for him this offseason. If you want to check that out, I'll put the link to that one in the comments and description of today's show. But, I do see a path for the Pittsburgh Steelers to potentially trade TJ Watt at the trade deadline. The first step is Pittsburgh isn't competitive. Aaron Rodgers comes here. He's not very good. The offensive line sucks. The team isn't winning football games, and they're kind of out of playoff contention. Number 2 thing that needs to happen, TJ Watt needs to be demanding $40+ million per season or some sort of figure the Steelers are not willing to pay. And then the final thing is somebody offers an absolute haul of draft picks for him. All right, if those kind of 4 things happen, I think that the Steelers might consider it. But honestly, I think the Steelers are going to be competitive. I think they're going to be buyers at the NFL trade deadline, so we don't even have to really worry about this. And my guess is I think that an extension gets done before the season even begins. We saw last year Cam Hayward and Pat Freiermuth's deals got done just before the season began, and I think it's going to be a very similar situation here between TJ Watt and the Steelers, where Watt's going to want $40+ million per season. He might even want to be the highest paid non-quarterback in football history. And he's not going to budge off that number, and the Steelers are going to spend all offseason trying to get him off that number, and then at the last second, they're going to kind of cave, and they're going to give him the number that he feels that he deserves. Now, coming up here, I got 3 more trade candidates, 3 more players that I could see the Steelers trading at the trade deadline if they end up not being competitive and they end up selling this year. But before we get into that, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Fanatics. And somebody that's not going to get traded at the trade deadline this year is DK Metcalf. So if you guys want to make a little bit of an investment in a player's jersey that's going to be around for a while here, you can go chatsports.com/DK. That also helps us out here at Steelers Talk because Fanatics sends us part of the proceeds of every single purchase that you guys make. So if you want to help us out a little bit financially and get yourself a brand new DK Metcalf jersey, today's your chance. Go to chatsports.com/DK. I'll put the link to that one in the comments and description of today's show. Another player that if the Steelers are losing and they're not competitive, and there's a team out there willing to give a pretty decent draft pick for Jaylen Warren, depending on how Warren's playing during the year and what the Steelers' future plans are for him, he is expected to be a free agent in 2026. And if they feel like Kaleb Johnson is the guy that is going to be for the future, and they don't really see Jaylen Warren being worth a bigger contract on the open market the next year, I could see them trading Jaylen for like an early day 3 draft pick if somebody is willing to pay that price. Now, I love Jaylen Warren. If you guys have been watching the channel, you guys know I think he's an awesome player. And like I said about Watt, I think the Steelers will be buying at the trade deadline, so I don't think you need to worry about this too much. But in the event the Steelers are not competitive and they are selling, I do think Warren will be one of those players that for the right price, the Steelers would be willing to let go of. Then you get to Calvin Austin III, another player here. I think that they like him a lot. Speed demon, really good with the ball in his hands. Good, underrated route runner. Really, really good route runner for kind of how people view him. And I actually think he's better on the outside than he is in the slot. Another misconception about him. Made some tough catches for the Steelers last year down the stretch. But if a team is looking for like a legit speed demon type of number 3 receiver at the trade deadline, and again, the Steelers are not competitive, I do think Calvin is somebody that could be dealt. And then Isaac Seumalo entering a year where I think that if the Steelers are not playing well, perhaps the Steelers could think about letting him go next year because he is, or this year I should say, at the trade deadline because he is slated to be a free agent in 2026. So if the Steelers aren't competitive and they don't really see Seumalo as a long-term starter down the road for this team, certainly wouldn't count out the Steelers letting go of Seumalo for a day 3 pick. That'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. We talked about trade candidates today, where honestly, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I don't think any of these guys get traded. So that's a good news if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. But if you made it to the end of today's show, type those real ones down there in the comments section. I greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. Click that subscribe button if you want more Steelers videos like this one every single day. Until next time, guys. Here we go, Steelers. Dominic, my man, love the profile pic there with the DK. Says, "Sup, Jack and Coop. Let's go Steelers. You think TJ gets his extension sometime soon, and Rodgers just needs to go to their the retirement home?"
I don't think TJ's extension is soon, but I do think it's before the season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be similar to Cam Hayward and Pat Freiermuth, where they got their deals done closer to the season. Because plain and simply, deadlines make deals, right? Everyone's heard that saying, and the Steelers don't extend players during the season. So there's a very clear deadline to get an extension done, and I think the Steelers want to get it done. So I do think it'll get done eventually, but probably not anytime soon, Dominic. And when it comes to Rodgers, right now it seems like he's enjoying his new marriage, potentially. Yeah. He was wearing a wedding ring over the weekend, and it seems like he's helping some friends out rebuild their lives after the California wildfires.
He was at the Kentucky Derby.
He's at the Kentucky Derby
tonight.
And it definitely doesn't seem like it seems to me, Coop, that he doesn't want to participate in the first 2 phases of the offseason program.
It does seem to me like that as well. He has no regard for the offseason.
He's a 20-year veteran. He's one of the most intelligent quarterbacks of all time. You don't really get to practice with your teammates during these first 2 phases. So, do I necessarily blame him for not wanting to do the first couple of phases? No. I would love to know he's going to be here eventually, but, I guess we'll just have to see what ends up happening in the future here. But I do think, I'm in my delusions and in my brain here, Coop, as you know, I think it's, for sure going to happen.
You think it's for sure going to happen? I still think it's going to, but I'm not as for sure as you are.
It's Aaron Rodgers, so anything's a possibility, so I won't go as far to say it's 100%, but he's working out during the offseason. He's specifically working out with guys like Kaleb Johnson and DK Metcalf. He says he loves the entire Steelers coaching staff, everyone from Mike Tomlin to Arthur Smith to Tom Arth. It seems like he really likes the Steelers. And it just seems like he's got some things that he wants to take care of right now. And once those things get taken care of, he'll sign on the dotted line. Oh! Alex G. Bang! With a $50 super chat. And I think the O-line will gel this season. It will make a noticeable difference.
That's what you got to bank on.
That's what you got to bank on. And I see the vision. All right, I see why the Steelers believe what they believe. when it comes to this group because they spent a lot of high draft picks on this group. They still believe Broderick Jones, who they drafted to be a left tackle, can still be a really good left tackle in this league. He's been awful at right tackle, but even Broderick has said himself he wasn't comfortable over there. So you hope here in year 3, making that transition back to left tackle, that he's going to be a lot better than in previous seasons. Again, that's kind of hopium because he's been terrible the first 2 years, but I see why they think that. Plus, they spent a first-round pick on him to play left tackle, and he hasn't played left tackle. You got to give him a shot. Then you got Troy Fautano, who I think is a difference-making player. He's awesome if he's on the field. The only question with him is injury stuff. And then you got Mason McCormick, who was never supposed to play last year. So people are kind of basing their evaluation on him based on last year's evaluation where he admittedly struggled at times, but he played left guard in college versus a lower level of competition. He needed a year to sit. And when James Daniels goes down, it's like, all right, kid, you got to step up. And he struggled at times, but the plan was always for him to have this offseason to grow and develop. Now he's had some experience under his belt. I understand why the Steelers believe in Mason McCormick at right guard. I do. So, we'll see if Pat Meyer can develop these guys. I certainly understand why people are skeptical of him. But listen, man, you got, 3 members of your offensive line that have been drafted in the first 2 rounds over the last 2 years? And then you got another guy that was drafted in the 4th round that they really like in Mason McCormick as well. So I see the talent. I see the potential of this group. It's just a matter of, can this Steelers coaching staff get the most out of them and get them to gel? And if they can, they have a lot of talent here. They could be really good. But also, if Pat Meyer does a shitty job developing these guys again, we might be looking at more disappointment on that group again. $5 from Charmander and Froky. Says Steelers should sign Kirk Cousins, get over the Aaron Rodgers, or else Mason Rudolph will be the starter. So, listen, man.
They should trade for Cousins and then still play Mason Rudolph because Cousins sucks.
Yeah, here's the thing about Cousins. I think he's worse than Rodgers based on what they put on film last year. Number 2, he'd be more expensive than Rodgers. Rodgers would cost you a 1-year, $10 million deal. With Cousins, you're going to have to take on probably a good portion of his current contract with Atlanta, which is very lucrative. And then, I just think Rodgers is the better option overall.
I like Mason Rudolph.
Plus, you don't have to give up draft capital for Rodgers. You have to give up a draft pick for Cousins. But yeah, man. But here's what I'll say, Charmander. Albert Breer came out with an article today saying it's either the Steelers or they're waiting for an injury on Cousins. So the Steelers can wait to trade for Kirk Cousins if they want. If they want to set a deadline for mandatory minicamp for Aaron Rodgers, which is what I have suggested.
June 10th.
If Rodgers is not signed by June 10th, you trade for Kirk Cousins and you ride. All right, but you give Rodgers every opportunity to sign here because he is clearly the best option, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with that. $5 from Gary Frank says, say Rodgers sign. Congrats out and goes out and goes 1-3. Do you see them benching him or do they let him go and hope for the best?
He isn't getting benched until the season is almost mathematically over.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it would take a couple more games. If they get to
if they go 1-7 and they're at the trade deadline,
2-7, 3-7, once they start getting to the range where they're not making the playoffs, then I think they probably actually go to Will Howard and give him a chance to start. But honestly, we talked about it today. As long as TJ Watt's healthy, guys, the Steelers have had dog shit offenses the last several seasons, and they're still winning 9-10 games a year because the defense is carrying them and TJ Watt is carrying them. So if Watt's healthy and this defense is even better than it was last year, I think if the Steelers have a top 15 offense, they're going to be a Super Bowl contender. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. But Justin says, I actually like the Rodgers saga. We have been talking about this since March. Enjoy the circus because it may never happen again.
It's happened 2 years in a row.
Listen.
Now the Ayuk saga wasn't to this degree either.
I will say I would rather just have my quarterback locked up. I would rather not have to sign a new quarterback. I'd rather just have my franchise quarterback locked in for the season. And for the channel, for the content, Coop, Aaron Rodgers, this whole saga has been awesome for our channel. But for my mental psyche, it's just been awful.
Oh, we know.
I have been in shambles for 2 months straight. At this point. Okay. Let's get
On that note,
let's get into my Kaleb Johnson breakdown here, guys. Really going to get things going here. Can't wait. This is going to be an interesting video, guys. I hope you like it. Let's get into it. My Kaleb Johnson breakdown and why I think he is the missing piece to the Steelers offense. It's coming at you right now. Last year, the Philadelphia Eagles brought in a game-changing running back in Saquon Barkley, completely catapulting their rushing offense to the top of the National Football League and to the Super Bowl. And this year, the Pittsburgh Steelers are attempting to do the same thing. But instead of going to free agency to get their running back, they went to the draft, drafting Kaleb Johnson, running back out of Iowa, who they are hoping is going to have a similar style of impact to their offense as Saquon Barkley had with the Eagles last year. Now, make sure you guys stay tuned here because I think Johnson has a major strength in his game that he shares with Saquon Barkley, and the Steelers are hoping is going to be able to translate to the league and make a similar type of impact that Barkley had there in Philly last year. All right, now, before we get into the video, make sure you click that thumbs up icon if you are stoked for Kaleb Johnson's career here in Pittsburgh. I know I am. I think he's an awesome fit. We're going to be breaking down why I love him on today's show. Make sure you click that thumbs up icon if you're ready for Kaleb Johnson here in Pittsburgh. So first, let's take a look back here to 2024 and how the Steelers' run game looked last year with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren leading the way. Well, they weren't very good, all right? Rushing attempts per game, 6th in the league, and they were actually 4th in the league in rushing play percentage. So they wanted to run the football. They really tried. They just weren't very good at it, all right? 25th in yards per attempt, 24th in EPA, which was a negative EPA per rush attempt, and they were 28th in success rate. So they weren't a very successful rushing offense whatsoever. You can argue bottom 5, you can argue bottom 10. The moral of the story here, guys, the Steelers did not have a good rushing offense in 2024, and that really, put this offense in dire straits at times. And this offense, led by Arthur Smith, really wants to be led by the rushing attack. And, the two big issues last year, in my opinion, were the offensive line wasn't good enough as a run-blocking unit to be able to have the type of run game they wanted to have. And then Najee Harris, as the second issue here, wasn't really a fit for Arthur Smith's kind of offense here in Pittsburgh. And where it went wrong with Najee Harris is that he's more of a power back, all right? Bigger guy that can move the pile forward. And, I really appreciated the effort that Najee brought to the table here in Pittsburgh. But in an outside zone scheme, you got to have really good vision. You have to identify cutback lanes, and you have to be able to change your direction very rapidly. Put your one foot in the ground and then explode through a hole, pause, if you are the running back in this style of offense. And Najee just isn't that guy. And that's okay, but it just wasn't a good fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. All right, and I think the lazy comparison is because Najee Harris and Kaleb Johnson are close to the same size, that Kaleb Johnson is the next Najee Harris. Andrew Filipponi, for example, has made this comparison. I think if you actually watch these guys on film and you actually know what you're looking at, they're completely different running backs. So you can take a look at my scouting report on Kaleb Johnson. By the way, I put this together before the Steelers drafted him, so you guys know that it's not biased. But I love his size, 6'1", 224 pounds is definitely a good thing about him. I think his long speed is really, really good. Now, he ran a 4.57, so we'll address the long speed here in just a second, but I think it's excellent once he gets past the initial line. His vision is off the charts, arguably the best in this entire class. He's got excellent play strength, really tough for safeties and cornerbacks to bring him down out in space, and then the ball security. 0 fumbles, which is very important to Mike Tomlin. He's going to be able to secure that football very consistently. Now, the cons were he's scheme dependent. He doesn't have the best acceleration and agility in the world, so he really does depend on being in an outside zone system, which allows him to get ahead of steam, put his foot in the ground, find and identify a cutback lane, and then get to the second and third levels of the defense. And he's not the best at pass pro, but guess what? Jaylen Warren is just fine at that. And honestly, speaking of a guy that's a perfect fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense and what they want to do, like Kaleb Johnson is everything the Steelers were hoping Najee Harris was going to be last year for them, because he still brings the same kind of similar size that Najee brings to the table, but he also brings the vision that Najee lacked, all right, and that big playability and that ability to hit that top gear speed once he gets down the field. And, don't let Kaleb Johnson's, 40 time fool you. And I think a lot of people looked at that 4.57 and said, oh, he's not that fast. He's not that fast. Well, you look at the next gen stats and the kind of GPS measurements that they had. He was clocked at over 22 miles per hour multiple times last year at the University of Iowa. All right, to be running 22 miles per hour, that's like 4.3 level speed. So once Kaleb Johnson gets to that second and third level of the defense, once he gets past that initial line and he gets that initial head of steam, he's one of the fastest running backs in this entire class, running at you like a freight train at over 220 pounds. All right, so there's not a whole lot of people on the Steelers roster that has hit 22 miles per hour in a game collected by Next Gen Stats. So Kaleb Johnson, he is a big play threat because of that, where he can run away from defensive backs at 220 plus pounds, and that ability to create big, explosive plays in an outside zone rushing scheme has been something that's been lacking in the Steelers' offense for a very, very long time. That Kaleb Johnson, in my opinion, especially if this offensive line develops in the way the Steelers think it's going to develop, has a chance to be really special right out of the gate for the black and gold on offense. And you might be saying at home, but Jack, this offensive line is still a big issue. And I'm with you guys. All right, Pat Meyer is still here. He sucks. Broderick Jones has been terrible the first 2 years of his career at right tackle. Mason McCormick had some struggles last year. Troy Fautano, is he going to be able to stay healthy? I get all the concerns with the offensive line, guys, but Pittsburgh has really put their faith in the development of these young players, and they really believe this unit has what it takes to be a really good group. And I understand why they think that. Broderick Jones, from a physical perspective, is still a really, really good round one pedigree type of left tackle prospect, and he hasn't had the chance to play left tackle yet. Troy Fautano, when he's on the field, he is just absolutely fantastic. And then you got Sayamalu and Frazier, who are perfectly rock solid as well. And then McCormick, the plan was always for him to have this offseason to grow and develop so that heading into his second year, he'd be able to start and replace James Daniels. They like him a lot. And I liked him a lot coming out of South Dakota State last year. So I think that this offensive line, if they do develop, can actually be a very good group. They're very talented. And if that offensive line does hold up, watch out, man, because I think KJ is going to have one of the best rookie seasons of any running back in the entire National Football League because of how good of a fit he is for Arthur Smith's offense. Now, coming up next, I'm going to let you guys know what Kaleb Johnson has in common with Saquon Barkley. Not saying he is Saquon. I'm just going to let you guys know the trait that is very similar to Saquon Barkley that could really make or break Kaleb Johnson's career here with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But before we get into all that, let's have word from our sponsor here at Prize Picks, which is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash with just downloading the Prize Picks app on your phone for free. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, and all you have to do is pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, and you can also turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series. Every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you in the Takes Two ticket sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the championship. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, where every Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. You guys can see on screen right now what a PrizePicks projection looks like. I put these in before the playoff series here, before between the Knicks and the Boston Celtics here this week. I took the more on points per game average for Jalen Brunson, who's absolutely balling out right now. I took the more on Kristaps Porzingis in points per game, and I took the less in points per game average from Mikal Bridges. So download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup on the PrizePicks app today. PrizePicks, run your game. So Kaleb Johnson's greatest strength, in my opinion, is like Saquon Barkley, Kaleb Johnson only gets better as the game goes on, giving the Pittsburgh Steelers a potential ability to close out games in the fourth quarter with explosive runs and pick up first downs, even when the defense knows the Steelers are trying to run the football. This is something they really struggled with in previous seasons. And honestly, with the defensive culture here in Pittsburgh, it's going to be very important to close out games in the fourth quarter moving forward. Kaleb Johnson is the type of guy that's going to be able to do that for you if you have a lead in the fourth quarter, to put a team away, similar to how Saquon Barkley does it for the Philadelphia Eagles. And listen, man, I'm not saying, all right, I want to make this abundantly clear, I do not think Kaleb Johnson is going to have a historically good season this year for the Steelers like Saquon Barkley had for the Eagles last year. I'm just saying that their impact in the fourth quarter, their explosiveness and their stamina to play their best when the game is on the line and when the game is in balance gives Kaleb Johnson the ability to be Pittsburgh's closer on offense this year. And Mike Tomlin, if you know Mike Tomlin, he really does prefer his closer on offense to be his running back. He wants to have a lead in the fourth quarter, and he wants to run the living daylights out of the football to put a team away. This is what Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, had to say after the Steelers took Kaleb Johnson in round 3 this year. One of the more impressive stats you've seen in the fourth quarter. What did he average in the fourth quarter? I believe it was over 5 yards a carry, might have been closer to 6. So obviously this was on the minds of the Pittsburgh Steelers when they drafted Kaleb, number 83 overall in the third round this year. And the reason why Philadelphia is so unstoppable, guys, is because they can run the football in the fourth quarter extremely effectively with Saquon Barkley, even when the opposing defense knows it's coming. Because Saquon's incredible explosiveness and stamina, his ability to maintain that level of explosiveness throughout the course of a four-quarter football game is remarkable. All right, and Kaleb Johnson showed exactly that at Iowa last year, putting teams away consistently, having his biggest runs in the fourth quarter to put the team up multiple scores in the fourth quarter, putting a team away. That's what the Steelers are going to be really hoping this kid turns into in his rookie season and heading into his early season careers here, or its early career seasons here. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. And, you know, I think that it's been pretty well established here that the Pittsburgh Steelers are trying to emulate what the Philadelphia Eagles, teams like the Baltimore Ravens, are able to do, where in the fourth quarter you can hand it off to your running back even though the defense is loading up the box, even though they know the run is coming, and still have success. Having a guy that can find open lanes and to pick up first downs and pick up touchdowns in the game's biggest moments, even when the defense is expecting run, is really a superpower that can really help the Steelers enforce their will on their opponents and help them win a maximum amount of football games for their football team this year. And I think that Kaleb's perfect for the job that the Steelers are going to be asking him to do. Obviously, Arthur Smith wants to run a lot of outside zone. I think Kaleb Johnson is by far at his best when he's running outside zone. Obviously, he's used to playing with a lot of heavy tight end sets. Iowa ran a lot of 12 and 13 personnel last year with multiple tight ends. The Steelers want to play that way too. Kaleb Johnson still has a ton of experience. It was a workhorse at the University of Iowa last year. And despite that workhorse kind of workload, he was still playing his best football in the fourth quarter, which I think gives him a chance to be a truly special running back in the National Football League. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm really juiced up for this kid's rookie season. So what say you guys? Let me know down there in the comments section. What is the percent chance that Kaleb Johnson wins Offensive Rookie of the Year? Put it on a scale of 0 to 100 for me down there in the comments section. Now listen, man, there's a lot of different players in the league, a lot of good rookies that are entering the league here. But how about I give them somewhere between a 5 and 10% chance to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year trophy. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Really do appreciate all of your guys' support. We got more in-depth Steelers videos coming your way all throughout the week here. So don't miss a moment. Click that subscribe button and join the Steelers Talk family today. All right, 4 cuts, Mr. Coop. Round of applause for the Monday live show here. We got some super chats to get to here. My man John Stevenson says, "Hey, Jack and Coop, we can't run the ball all the time." And I agree.
You don't have to run the ball all the time, but you need to be able to run the ball effectively.
Yes. And I think they're going to be able. I think because you're going to be able to run the football effectively, it's going to open things up in the passing 100%. Game, right? Like Aaron Rodgers working that play action. We all know how great his guitar fakes are, right? When he puts out the hand, like when he was in Green Bay, when he was in a play action heavy offense where the run game was going good, was when he was winning MVPs. Now, I'm not saying he's going to win an MVP here in Pittsburgh. But I do think, if you get top 15 level quarterback play from Aaron Rodgers and TJ Watt stays healthy, like we discussed earlier in the show, this team's going to be in the playoffs next year.
The problem is if you don't have a quarterback that can effectively throw the ball down the field, teams can just put 8 guys in the box.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter, even if the Steelers have an improved offensive line, you won't be able to run the ball effectively.
And we saw that last year when Pickkins got injured, right? Like even when he came back, people didn't really respect the deep ball from Pittsburgh anymore. And because of that, like the run game couldn't get going. They had to deal with an extra guy in the box a lot. And, when I look at the situation, I look at an offense that's improved from last year, a defense that's improved from last year. This is a 10-3 football team with an inferior quarterback, in my opinion. I think Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback than Russell Wilson. I think the offensive line is better. I think the running back room is better. I think the wide receiver room is better. I think the defensive line is better. I think the secondary is better. This roster from top to bottom is better than it was last year. And you're sitting at 10-3 last year before TJ Watt got injured.
I'll add this. I think the distinction between Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback and Mason Rudolph or Kirk Cousins as your starting quarterback determines whether the roster this year is better than last year or not.
I mean, that's perfectly fair. If you have Mason Rudolph as your starting quarterback, that's the most important position.
That's what I'm saying.
And it's a downgrade, right? But if you get Rodgers, it's an upgrade.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know, man. If Watt can stay healthy, I'm telling you, man, this team can be dangerous. We were talking about this team like they were a legit Super Bowl contender when he was healthy last year.
I was just thinking about the possibility of Russell Wilson stinking in training camp for the Giants and us trading back for him.
No, we're not going to trade for – listen, I could see next offseason if Rodgers retires and they still want a veteran quarterback, maybe they – I still think it's unlikely, but that's the only way I could see Rodgers getting – or Russ coming back. But Gary Frank here, $2, says off topic, should they ban the tush push? I see arguments both for and against it.
I say ban, and here's why. It used to be banned, and then they unbanned it. Why?
And then another thing, too, is that they don't allow it for the they don't allow you to push a player's back
Correct.
On a field goal attempt. And you get penalized
Correct.
if you do that. If you use your own player in front of you to push on
Correct.
them, that's a penalty. And the reason for that is player safety. So it's either player safety for both or it's a non-player safety for both. I don't care which one you choose. If it's a safe play, have it be legal for both. But the hypocrisy with the two different rules is just stupid. So that's my take on it.
I also think that if you're going to keep the tush push legal, you should allow people to jump over the center on field goals.
I agree. I agree. Let's just make it consistent. That's all I care about. Make it consistent. $5 from Justin, my man, says another reason to hate Cowherd. He said we should trade Watt, Pickkins, and 2 firsts for Shadur.
Oh, we saw that.
How does he have a job?
Because he does exactly what you're doing, Justin.
You're talking about him.
Exactly.
As Cowherd has said a number of times, in this business, it's not about necessarily being right. It's about being interesting.
Yep.
And the fact that you're talking about his trade idea
exactly
makes it interesting, right? So, listen, I have a lot of respect for Cowherd in terms of a media personality. I think that he's a great storyteller. I think that, I think he's as popular as he is for a reason. Okay, a very entertaining person, very engaging person, but he doesn't know shit about football. he really doesn't, man.
Nothing.
He really doesn't know that much. And I mean, to say Shadur Sanders is worth literally the 2 most valuable players on the entire Steelers roster, arguably last season, in Watt and Pickkins. because we saw how valuable they were when they weren't at 100% last year. And 2 first-round picks for somebody that was a 5th-round quarterback this year.
144 overall.
to the fucking clowns, too. If the Browns don't take him, how far does he fall? Does he fall
Somebody
much further?
Just
like
him,
like Philly, maybe?
Yeah.
But even Philly, like they showed a video, actually, of them saying, what quarterback do we want to target today? And they said Kyle McCord over Shadur Sanders.
What a joke.
I honestly don't know how far he would have fallen if Cleveland just said no to him. $2 from Gary. Says, how many seasons does Boswell have left? As many as he wants, and as long as he's good, Gary. That's what I'll say to that. All I know is that right now he's arguably the best kicker in all of football.
Oh, yeah. I mean, kickers can play well into their 40s. So.
Yeah. Like, look at Vinatieri. It was almost 50 when he
How
when he
old's
hung him
Boz
up.
right now?
He's getting up there, but listen, man, like I think Boz is probably the most
He's 34?
Yeah,
Boz
yeah.
could play 7 to 8 more years.
Yeah, Boz can easily get another couple of contracts, in my opinion. So he's getting up there, but he's not like nearing the end, is what I'd say. As long as he keeps kicking well, he can play as long as he wants.
Absolutely.
As far as I'm concerned, man. All right, well, I'll give him a 2-minute shot clock here, Coop. Let's give him a 2-minute shot clock here to get your super chats in. Last call to get your Steelers topic up on screen. You guys get 2 minutes here to get your final super chats in, and then we're going to call it a day. We're getting close to 7 p.m. Eastern time there on the East Coast. So, I'm sure people got dinner and all this different stuff to take care of. Cassie's actually in Minnesota right now. So, Cassie, if you're watching, I miss you. But I do have dinner by myself tonight. Where should I get dinner tonight? The wedding thing? Yeah. I mean, I put it in the AM video today, and Coop was like, why are we talking about this? This is ridiculous.
That was exactly what I said.
And it's going to be $30K.
We'll see. Will it be?
And it's going to be $30K.
Will it be?
Hey, Jack Lotteray, come on here, man. All right, well, I'm not going to talk to you off screen. What's up, Jack? You guys can see how he's just above the box. How we doing, Jack? How's Red Sox rundown?
It's actually popping.
It's popping.
They're playing the Rangers.
They are playing.
I like those new Fenway alternates they're going to be wearing.
I think they look really good. The mock-ups that we saw a month or so ago, I didn't like them, but they made the numbers.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
Where they were white before.
Oh, okay. I do like the yellow better.
That's enough baseball talk on the channel.
That is enough baseball talk on Steelers talk, because we're not doing the Pirates suck, so we're not doing the Skeens watch parties this year, unfortunately. But whenever
this is a good suggestion for dinner.
Ooh, Shannon Cassidy says I should get 5 guys tonight. It is Cinco de Mayo. That is true. So I'm thinking Chipotle.
This guy.
I'm thinking Chipotle for Cinco de Mayo. Mexican grill.
Ridiculous.
Hey, it says Mexican in the title description. All right.
It does.
Oh! Gary Frank Bang! He says, F it. Here we go, Steelers. Here we go. He says Mason starts 4 games. I don't know, man. Somebody's going to have to get injured.
I'll be honest. It wouldn't shock me at all if Mason started games for this team.
It wouldn't shock me either. I mean, Rodgers is an older guy. He could get injured, and then
now I will say this.
Kirk could get injured.
I think Will Howard has a better chance to start 4 games than Mason Rudolph does.
Because here's the thing. Here's the thing with that, Gary. I think that the way Mason Rudolph gets more starts than Will Howard this year is if there's an injury. You know what I'm saying? Like if there's like an injury to Rodgers where you're still competitive at that point in the season.
That's the only way Mason starts.
That's the way Mason plays.
But if the Steelers stink,
it'll be Howard.
That's what, exactly.
It'll be Howard if they stink. Like they're not just going to throw Mason Rudolph out there to see if he can be the long-term answer. Because I'm going to spoil it for you. He's not.
He ain't.
And I love Rudy. We have a freaking song for him on this channel.
We do.
But we're also realistic on this channel.
Well,
and
sometimes.
Mason Rudolph is a backup quarterback, and that's okay.
That's more than okay. They gave him 2 years, correct?
Yeah, and they like him as a backup, and I like him as a backup. But like people saying, oh, we're cool with Mason Rudolph in a win now season. No, we're not. No, you ain't.
I'll say this is where I differ from Spare Dog. I'm cooler with Mason Rudolph than I am Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, that's probably where we differ. I think Kirk Cousins is better than
He
Mason.
fucking stinks.
Well, did you see Mason Rudolph play last year?
Yep.
And I mean, neither's great. I will say I won't love to take on a big contract like Kirk's.
It's like whether you want a sloppy shit or a rock hard shit. They're both shit.
What?
You heard me.
This is getting off the rails, man. Gary, thanks for the 50. You're the best. We love you. All right, that'll be it for today's show. Coop and I will wave our towels here one last time. And until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. Here we go. We'll see you guys next time.